welcome Cohen in the City, Suburban On Air, and a real pleasure to invite two very well-known radio personalities who are missed greatly on CJAD. I can tell you for sure that people miss you. I miss you, and John, my mom, she really misses you. She talks about it daily. She was your biggest fan, and she loves Dr. Laurie too, but she's 82, so
she won't admit it, right?
She's more of a John, exactly. She might not admit it, but we have Dr. Laurie Betito and John Paul, who have united to bring back passion. Passion. I spoke to Dr. Laurie a few months ago when there were changes at CJAD. So let's start off with Dr. Laurie. 22 years you did that show. And it must have been a shock when it was taken off the air on CJD.
You know, not so much of a shock, because for 22 years, I know the radio business, as John does too, and we know how it works. It's like you get the phone call and, oh, things have changed. So I've always kind of been waiting for that phone call. It just so happened, I'm surprised I lasted 22 years, every night on the air. So I'm very happy that I had that opportunity. I have nothing but gratitude. So yes, it was a bit of an adjustment. I have to tell you, the first day was a shock. Called John right away. We spoke, and we both felt better. And in the end, I had to readjust my life, because I didn't know what to do with myself in the evenings anymore. I was like, what do people do at night? I've always worked at night. I really have no idea. So that was an adjustment. And then right away started thinking about, all right, well, this isn't the end. This is the beginning of something new. That's all.
Yes, and so how does John Paul, who was on from 7 to 10 weeknights, how does John Paul end up becoming the co-host of a show on sexuality? How does that, John? John, I'm asking you the question.
That's a great question. I think if you listen to my show, and certainly one of the highlights of my show, and I always got great feedback on this, was the few minutes Dr. Laurie and I would talk every night. And over the pandemic, I did a bit on Friday nights that we called Nightside Idol, where we'd invite all these great local musicians to send us songs, and we would just play them and talk about the songs. And Dr. Laurie was my Paula Abdul. So she would come on early, and we would play these songs and talk about it. And we always had so much fun. And from time to time, I would go on Dr. Laurie's show. Usually every year when we did the big event where we invited listeners into the radio station, that night, I would usually stay on Dr. Laurie's show, or she would come on early and co-host, just because we were in the building together. So when we got talking about podcasts and whatnot, Dr. Laurie and I were just sort of sharing some ideas. And every time we talked, we had so much fun talking that it just became obvious that the skills that sort of Dr. Laurie needed to put all this together, I had. And I always just loved hanging and asking questions, and maybe making some of those sexual topics a little bit more lighthearted. So it was just kind of like, hey, why don't we do it together? It'll be easy. And so far it has been extremely easy and fun.
It has been so much fun. We're really enjoying it.
Tell me a little bit more about that, Dr. Laurie. So tell us, explain how often the podcast is on, how people can access it, and what your goal is for this podcast.
Well, let's start with the goal. The goal has always been my goal, which is to educate the public on topics, to be there for them, to answer questions that they may have about sexuality, just to have an open forum where it's just completely open to talk about sexuality in a non-threatening way. And John's very easy about it too. He doesn't blush. I don't blush. Like it works, right? So that the goal stays the same. We are launching every Tuesday. We launch a brand new episode, and they can find it anywhere. It's available even on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Music, Google, SoundCloud. It's just anywhere that podcasts are found, we are there now.
So John, now you have your own podcast, I believe, right now. But let me ask you, how much do you miss your show on CJD? Because, when I listened to it at night, you just sounded like you had a lot of fun on that show.
Yeah, I mean, I said this on the air and I said it off the air, and certainly it was always my sort of arrangement with CJD 800, which is, it was a passion of mine. I love radio. I'm a radio guy. And I just said, look, I'm going to do this till you guys tell me not to do it. It wasn't my career. I have a great regular day career. It was something I did every night. It's weird because I'm a radio guy, that my hobby is radio, but I don't woodwork and I don't golf. So, the 3 hours a night, instead of watching TV or reading books, I was doing this crazy show. So I miss the audience the most, because I really felt over the 5 years, we built a really cool little community of people that got together every night and shared these fun and interesting stories and had good debates about conversations. And we had a good series of people that would join and share information and guests and that sort of stuff. So I do miss that. But if I'm honest, I don't miss the sort of having to be ready for 7 o'clock and having to be on for 3 hours. And even just in the environment of CJAD 800, which, I'm a big fan of, like the other night, I would have had to have done something with the Oscars, which isn't anything that I personally care about, but I would have done it because it was expected under that umbrella of News Talk. So I like in the podcast world that, number one, certainly a lot of hardcore fans have followed me and they're still there and they're still interacting and doing things, because we do the podcast live on Twitch, so they can still interact just like they used to, texting. And in fact, what's even cooler is on the radio show, all these interesting characters could text in, but I was the only one that could read them. And the only way people saw what they had to say was if I read it. Well, in the Twitch environment, they're all together. So not only are they seeing all the crazy things they're all saying, but they're talking to each other. So that community's actually even grown a bigger bond. So we take that audio and we put it as a podcast. And what I love about it is I can pick the topics that I really want to talk about. If it goes an hour and 20 minutes, that's how long it goes. If it goes 40 minutes, that's how long it goes. And while I do keep a pretty regular schedule, I do it every night at 7 o'clock. If I start at 7:05 or I start at 6:55, none of that really matters. So I like that flexibility, and I never expected that, because I'm a radio guy and I love doing it. But I do miss the callers. I do miss the people that, the great thing about radio is people drop into the show at unexpected times, and they may drop in and not understand the show, and then they get very angry, so they immediately want to call and fix me, and they get mad at me on the air, and of course the audience is like, you're really getting mad about this? So I do miss that spontaneity of it, but there's a lot of it, actually. If I'm being honest, I'm quite surprised that I don't miss. I kind of like the flexibility, and strangely my wife likes having me back most nights, so
John,
that's been a crazy change.
John, how do people find your podcast?
So my podcast is The Pole Position. So you can Google The Pole Position with John Pole. It's, as Dr. Laurie said, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio. It's everywhere. Or you can go to my website, which is thepoleposition.ca, and you can subscribe and get updates and all that kind of stuff. But I literally am not doing it for any other reason than I was asked so much. Like my show in Montreal was also on in Toronto, right. And I was amazed by how many people in Toronto and Windsor, because the show was on there too, that were just like, can you please do a podcast? So I did one just because they asked, and then I was like, well, that was kind of fun. I'll do another one. And then I said, well, I'll just do it till I don't like doing it. Yeah. And now it's kind of become routine. So it could end tomorrow. But for now, as long as people seem to be enjoying it, I'll keep doing it.
Dr. Laurie, the online, you had a following online already. Now you have the potential for passion to be heard all over the world. You're probably already seeing it.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, even prior to that, all my shows would be podcasted anyway. Like they would all be reserved, and people would download them from all over the world already, which was amazing. Right. But you're right. This offers a platform where it just can go anywhere. And we can carry it anywhere. But like John, I think I do miss the listeners. I had a community. The passion community was something that was built from decades of people listening. So I've been getting inundated by emails and people saying they miss me and they miss the show, and especially during the pandemic, where people need a little bit of, I guess, sanity or be able to talk about their mental health issues, because I didn't just talk about sexuality, but also about mental health issues. So that was a blow to a lot of listeners who needed that little bit, but so now they can just download the podcast. So it's all good.
You had a very interesting, I would even use the word odd sometimes, guests that I would listen to and say, are these real people? Is
Always
this
real.
these people are married and they're swingers. These people have, I mean, I listen almost out of fascination. Are some of these fascinating people going to be on the podcast as well?
Absolutely. John and I have plans for bringing on guests and attacking topics that him and I may be uncomfortable with. And, it's like, we don't do this stuff, but let's bring somebody else in.
Mike, I think you and I would both be just shocked if we ever got to see all of the emails Dr. Laurie gets, because some of the stuff she sends for us to talk on this podcast, I would like, wow, I thought my listeners were bizarre or crazy or interesting or out there. Dr. Laurie's got some doozies in there, but I think at the end of the day, what you find is they're real people, and they're asking these questions that many of us, somewhere back in the back of our mind are like, kind of interested in that. Like, what is that about? So while some people are too shy, or it might not be in their interest area, they're kind of still interested to see like, what's the other side like?
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Laurie, I've talked to you about this in the past. A lot of people don't realize that this is not your full-time job. It never was. You have a full-time job, right? You have a practice, you've written books, you do speaking tours, you're involved in charitable. Just remind us of some of the other things you actually do to make a living.
Oh my goodness. Well, to make a living, I'm a full-time clinical psychologist. So that's my real full-time job. My radio gig was that was like John. It was for fun. It was something I totally enjoyed doing. And it was a side thing. It wasn't the thing, although it took up a lot of my life. But no, mostly I do speaking engagements. I get asked to do a lot of workshops. I see clients on a daily basis. I have a pretty full practice right now, so it's busy. I sit on several boards of sexuality type organizations and nonprofit organizations. So my days are jam packed. But it's great. It's a great life because everything I do, I love.
And John, the same with you. You run MBC, which is My Broadcasting Corporation. Tell us a little bit about that.
So we operate in 21 markets, actually starting tomorrow, 22 markets in Ontario. And we mostly small and medium-sized markets. Peterborough would be our biggest market. And we have a group of radio stations, and we're very local news information driven, but we play music somewhat like you would hear on The Beat or a station like that. We do have a classic hit brand, and we have a classic rock station. We have an alternative station, but the majority are adult, contemporary, fun. We have a very large newsroom. We believe in local news. And, so that's always been the bulk of my day. I'm just pretty blessed that I work with an incredible group of broadcasters that we started in 2004, and we built this company. And I found out a few years ago that I was kind of getting in the way because we had built it. I'm such a builder that I would do things, and everyone would be like, John, you're literally creating work for us. Let us just do what we're doing. It works. So I kind of backed off, which that's how I kind of found this, like, well, I got to find something to do. And I guess I like radio. So that's where I partnered up with Bell Media and was doing these talk shows, because I love talk radio,
right.
And I don't have a talk radio station, but so it was always kind of fun. But yeah, that's my regular day job. And it suits me well because it helps with a lot of the other things that I like to do as my passions.
So one more question for each of you. John, I asked you off air about AM 600 and whether, what are your thoughts on whether AM 600 can actually happen in Montreal? I would love to see NBC involved, but you said that's probably not going to happen. What are your thoughts on AM 600, which is now playing canned music for the last several years, has a license, and we have an opportunity to have another talk radio station in Montreal?
Yeah, look, I think that they have an opportunity because, number one, more so than ever before, I think there are a lot of unique and interesting Montrealers that have a degree of brand equity that are available more than any other time in the world. Like, I mean, you take a Dr. Laurie, or you take Barry Morgan, or, there's a lot of really quality broadcasters that are kind of on the sideline right now that could be plopped in there and have instant credibility. If they're going to do it in the way they're doing it now, which is a very independent route, I think they got to be creative. And if I was them, I would take a very, almost like an NPR tact, where I would say, like, look, maybe I'll use Barry Morgan as an example, but maybe Barry's on for 3 hours, but maybe he puts in a couple songs. Maybe it's not all talk radio, because it's got to be different than CJAD to be successful. The personalities would certainly help, but that's not going to win it all. So if they came in with like a little bit different vibe and they had some interesting people, they could do it. But the reality of radio is success in radio is driven by the sales team. If you have a great sales team, the format is always important, but a great radio station, if you have a good sales team, you can solve any problem. You can buy more billboards or get a bigger morning show. So they need to have a real good sales strategy. As an independent in a city like Montreal that is already pretty much dominated by conglomerates, who span a lot of different, like, Bell Media has, multiple radio stations and billboards and TV and all the things that they have. And then, the guys across the street are very similar. And then you divide it into an English-French deal. It's not going to be an easy go, but I think there's a model that would work. Even, as I mentioned, NPR, and you look at something like PBS, I think we're in an environment now where if you had the right hosts, I think you could actually even ask your listeners to say, hey, would you give us $10 a month? And I think they might be surprised that there's a bunch of Montrealers that go, yeah, I give you $10 a month, because I give $10 a month to Netflix and I only watch it for a few hours, but I listen to you all day. So I think if you came up with a creative, interesting model, you could make it work. Or one of those big guys brings it into the fold. But do I believe there's an opportunity for an AM talk radio station? Yes. Would it be something that would rival CJAD 800? I don't know. Like, CJAD 800 is a very unique monster in Canadian broadcasting. Like the shares and the listening that they take in Montreal, it's very impressive. And it's very impressive because they have an outstanding crew of broadcasters there. If there was ever a time, certainly based after what took place, I, as a broadcaster, have never seen, and this isn't just in Montreal, it's in all those markets where those layoffs and stuff took place, where the audience, like, I see emails now where the audience is actually angry. And I've never seen that before. Like, usually, like, people go, oh, okay, that guy's gone. I get it. Things change, whatever. But this time it was different. So maybe there's an interesting opportunity there where they could jump a few share points just for free. But it takes money and it takes time. And these days, humans are not very patient. Investors are not very patient. So you would need a few investors that go, hey, let's give this 4 or 5 years. But I think it could work.
I agree. And they have the investors, they have the owners. They're just spinning old records with Jim Connell's voice doing commercials. But yeah. I digress. Dr. Laurie, one last thing. You have a fundraiser, a successful fundraiser. You're always so clever with. Tell us about that. That's we'll close off on that note.
It's not my brainchild, but I am a newly appointed president of a board of directors of Sex and Self, which is an organization that was created by McGill students, which is a fabulous initiative where they are bringing more education to the college community and putting on events for the college community because of this belief that we just don't get enough sexual wellness education. So people can follow Sex and Self on all the media platforms, social media platforms, and there's all kinds of events happening. And there's a fundraiser, obviously, to be able to bring programs. They're also creating programs not just for college students, but also to bring into the high schools. And I just love it because it's an initiative by college students. And to me, it's supporting the youth of today to take over, is fabulous. So if people are interested, Sex and Self.
Terrific. Well, I thank you both for your time, and we know we'll be listening to the passion podcast, The Pole Position, and following John. Also, I love following him on Twitter. So thank you very much for your time and all the best.
Pleasure. Take care, Mike.
Bye-bye.